The day I married Daniel, my mother didn't cry because she was happy for me. She cried because, in her eyes, I had ruined the future she had planned for our family. I still remember standing outside the courthouse in my simple white dress, holding Daniel's hand while my father stared at us like we had committed some unforgivable crime. My mother wouldn't even look at him. She kept saying, "You'll regret this." I told her I loved him, that he treated me with respect, that he made me feel safe, and that I wasn't asking her to understand everything overnight. I was only asking her to accept that I had made my choice. She shook her head and whispered, "Then you're no longer my daughter." I thought she was angry. I thought she would cool down after a few weeks. I was wrong. That evening, my father called and told me not to come home again. My younger brother stopped answering my messages. Family photos disappeared from my mother's social media, except the ones where I had been carefully cropped out. For months, I waited for someone to call. No one did. Daniel never pressured me to choose between him and my family. In fact, he was the one who told me, if they ever come back, you don't have to forgive them just because they're family. But I wanted to believe they would come back. So I built a life without them. 9 years passed, Daniel, and I worked hard, bought a small house, and built a quiet life that had nothing to do with the approval of the people who had abandoned me. We had learned how to celebrate birthdays with friends, how to make our own traditions, and how to stop expecting a phone call that might never come. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, someone knocked on our front door. When I opened it, my entire body went still. My mother stood there, 9 years older. Her hair had turned gray around the edges, but I knew that face instantly. She looked past me toward the house, then at Daniel, and finally back at me. There was no apology in her eyes, no hug, no tears. Instead, she smiled nervously and said, "We need to talk. Your father and I are in a difficult situation, and you're the only person who can help us." I stared at her, completely speechless. After 9 years of silence, my mother hadn't come back because she missed me. She had come back because she needed something. And when she finally told me what she wanted, I realized she had no idea who I had become while she was gone. I didn't invite my mother inside immediately. I stood in the doorway, staring at the woman who had once told me I was no longer her daughter. Daniel quietly came beside me, but he didn't say a word. My mother looked uncomfortable, almost impatient. "Can we please come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked into our home and looked around at everything, the framed wedding photo, the family pictures, the bookshelves, the small award sitting on the mantel that Daniel had received for his work. Her eyes stopped on a photograph of us standing beside our house. "You did all this?" she asked. "We did," I replied. She nodded slowly, then sat down without being invited. My father wasn't with her. That immediately made me suspicious. "Where's Dad?" I asked. She folded her hands in her lap. "He's waiting in the car." "Why?" I asked. She hesitated before saying, "Because he knows you might refuse to help us." Daniel glanced at me. I could see the same question in his eyes. What exactly do they want? My mother finally took a deep breath. "Your father's business is in trouble," she said. "We're facing debts. The bank is threatening to take the house, and we need money immediately." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the situation felt unreal. 9 years ago, they had told me they didn't need me. Now, they were standing in my living room asking for help. "How much?" I asked. My mother named an amount so large that the room seemed to become silent. I stared at her. Daniel slowly shook his head. "That's not a small favor," he said. My mother ignored him. "You have savings," she told me. "You and Daniel are doing well. We know about the house. We know about his company." I looked at her carefully. "How do you know so much about our finances?" Her expression changed. For the first time, she looked nervous. "We've kept an eye on you." I felt something inside me harden. They had disappeared from my life, but apparently they had never stopped watching it. "Mom," I said quietly, "you didn't speak to me for 9 years. You didn't come to my wedding anniversary. You didn't call when I was sick. You didn't even send a message when I bought this house. And now you suddenly know what I have in my bank account." She lowered her eyes. "We are still family." Daniel let out a slow breath. "Family doesn't only show up when there's a bill." My mother became defensive. "I know what I did was wrong, but your father and I are desperate." I expected myself to feel angry. Instead, I felt strangely calm. 9 years of being rejected had taught me something important. Desperation could make people say sorry, but it didn't always make them change. I stood up and walked toward the desk in the corner. From a drawer, I pulled out an old envelope. Inside was a letter my mother had written 9 years earlier, the same letter where she had formally cut me out of the family. I placed it on the table between us. "Do you remember this?" I asked. She looked at it and went pale. "I didn't mean, you meant every word," I interrupted, "and I believed you." She began crying. "I was wrong." I nodded. "Yes, you were." Then she said something that made Daniel and me exchange a stunned look. "There's another reason we need your help. Your father didn't tell me everything. The bank isn't the only problem. Someone has discovered what happened to your grandmother's estate." My heart stopped. My grandmother had died shortly before I married Daniel. I had been told she left almost nothing, but my mother's next words changed everything. "Your grandmother left something specifically for you," she whispered, "and your father has been hiding it for 9 years. I stared at her, unable to speak. Suddenly, I understood why they had come back now. They weren't just asking for money. They were terrified that I might discover the truth before they could control the story. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. "Tell me everything," I said. Her face went completely white. She had no idea that I already had a copy of my grandmother's original will, and that I had received it that very morning. I placed the original will on the table. Mom stared at it, speechless. Grandma had left the house and most of her estate to me, not my parents. I didn't scream or celebrate. I simply told Mom, "You lost me when you chose prejudice over love. You don't get to return when money changes the situation." I helped only with what I freely chose to help with, then closed the door. 9 years later, I finally understood. They hadn't lost a daughter. They had lost access to one.